Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 5.
Well, folks, welcome back. Gale Force Wins. My name is Gerry Carew, the co-founder of Gale Force Wins. Every Tuesday night, we come out with a special episode featuring someone in the community that is on an interesting journey. Well, in this case, a friend of mine, who used to be my next door neighbor, Steve Mercer, told me about this fine lady who's sitting next to me, that she has a business that, Gerry, you really need to talk to her. That's all I needed to hear. Katherine and I had a chat, didn't we? And it went very well. So here we are. So without further ado, Katherine, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and then we're going to take the conversation from there.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Katherine Peddle, and I'm a registered dental hygienist, but I'm also the owner of the Oral Health Center and Mobile Smiles. And I'm a resident of Paradise and a born and bred Newfoundlander. Yeah.
Fantastic. And, you know, one of the things I want to do is bring it back to, we're going to go back to your childhood. You know, the first question I like to ask is, when you were younger, did you anticipate ever owning your own business?
No.
Was that something? No?
No.
Was there any mentors in your life to talk and push you in that direction?
No.
Right.
I was from a very small little community. The place is called Baytona, which most people don't know, but it's in Notre Dame Bay. And I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do something different. And so I became a dental hygienist because I didn't know anybody who was a dental hygienist. So that sounds cool. Let's try that. And that's how I got into the field, I guess, of dentistry.
I'm going to take you back to Baytona, and you're in school. You know, let's dig into it. Were you a good student, an exceptional student? Where would you put yourself?
I was a good student. I wasn't exceptional.
No?
No. You know, I liked school, but not love school.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I wasn't fabulous, but I was okay. I couldn't wait to get out of there.
The reason I ask that, I think, is important. You know, anyone who's watching this, most times they look at a business owner like you, and they, you know, frankly, it is heroic what you're doing. But you're also, you know, doesn't mean that you came out of school with 100 average and everything, right?
Definitely
I think
not.
it's really important for people out there to understand that we're, you know, yes, we're engaged in entrepreneurial activity, but we're human beings, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, no, it wasn't like that for me. I was just an average student, you know. I just wanted to get through it.
Yeah.
I was curious. I had a teacher one time tell me I asked too many questions. So I was also very curious in things that I didn't know about and just how to investigate that stuff. So when I was in school, I just dreamed of leaving because everything was the same. And so I just wanted to leave and experience what else was out there. And then I moved to town in '93 when I came to go to school to do dental assisting. And did that for about 10 years.
What school would that have been back
At
then?
the time, it was the Career Academy.
Yeah.
And it was a one-year program. And then after the one-year program, you had to do a work term, which I did. And then I temped in the city at various dental offices. And my first job, my permanent job, was at a dental laboratory where I was the secretary, and they created dentures and orthos and crowns and bridges. So I learned a lot about that stuff and learned how to bend wires and make ortho retainers, stuff like that.
Sounds like you did a lot of tasks that weren't necessarily written in the job description.
Yeah, so and because of my curiosity, I guess I just tried a bunch of different things. Let's see what happens if I do that. And yeah, and then fast forward a little bit, I had a job at a dental clinic where I was the receptionist for a while, and I was the person who looked after their computer stuff. And that was in, in the late 90s when the internet was coming on.
I remember the late 90s.
Right? It was right before, when 2000, when everyone thought the world was going to end because of the rollover.
I was working in digital marketing then, so yes, I remember. But anyway,
right?
Go ahead.
And so I was in charge of, if something went wrong with the computer, I had to fix it. So I decided that I wanted to go back to school and do IT.
Interesting.
And because I wasn't a great student and I had been out for about 10 years, I had to go and do a math placement test. And I didn't have enough, my scores were so low that I had to go back and do a night course in math. And so at that time, I said, okay, well, that's what I'll do. I'm going to pursue this IT thing. But while I was doing the night course in math, they said that IT market was flooded. Everyone was trying to do IT because everybody thought it was, the next big thing. And so I remember having a conversation with the hygienist that was at the clinic at the time. And I said, what am I going to do now? Like, everyone's saying this is not a good idea. And she goes, you should be a hygienist. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And she was like, you'd be great at that. And that meant going to Dalhousie, because that's the closest dental hygiene program. So I enrolled in MUN because I had to do a first year prerequisite in order to apply to Dal. And then I went to Dal for 2 years and became a dental hygienist. So totally different from.
So you had been working for 10 years. You went into MUN, get upgraded, and then you went to Dal.
Yeah.
That's pretty, that's a bit of a pivot at that
that's
age.
a big pivot. I did one year, I did the math placement, and then the next year I did a first year at MUN. I had 5 courses, and I did a nighttime chemistry course because you had to have chemistry as well. So it was like 6 courses. Yeah.
Were you doing some shifts, or did you just walk away from a paycheck?
Yeah.
You walked away completely.
From a paycheck. Yep.
That is a recurring theme later on in your life.
So this is why, this is also, I used my RRSPs. So I had been contributing to my RRSPs, and you can use your RRSPs as a educational fund. So that's what I did at the time. And so, yeah.
That's interesting. Let me back up a little bit. So you left Baytona and you go to MUN, or no, you go to Career Academy. What was that transition like? Because you were from a smaller community.
I loved it.
Did you?
Yes, I did. I couldn't wait.
You must have been nervous.
No,
not at all.
Definitely was not. And we talk about this now and how everyone's so connected. When you left home in 1993, you left and you didn't talk to anybody back then. Like once a week you would get to call your parents because it was too expensive to talk on the phone long distance.
Yeah.
And they were like, do you need anything? Do you need any food? Do you need any money? Yeah. And then we just moved into a basement apartment with a bunch of other, students, and we were all, learning, and it was exciting. I used to drive the Metro bus to back and forth.
Take the Metro bus.
Take the bus, yes. So
I was going to say, my God, you're
driving.
driving.
I did not drive the Metro bus, no.
You're driving the Metro bus as well.
The Metro bus back and forth to school, standing outside in the...
Where was the Career Academy at that point? Was that up on...
Higgins Line.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Higgins Line. And I lived next to the village area, in the village.
Wow, you had a bit of a ways to go.
Yeah. So you got to learn where everything was when you rode the Metro bus, because you had to go in all these little nooks and crannies, right? So you learned the city really quickly that way.
So let's go. You're in Dalhousie, Halifax. That's a lot bigger than Memorial University. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I love that. Dal had its own faculty of dentistry, so you were kind of off to your own self.
Yep.
And it was a 2-year program, but we were in with the dental faculty, so the dentistry group was there for 4 years. So it was a tight-knit group. And it was great. We had a lot of different rotations. We were right next to the Tupper building, which was the medical students, and then right across from that was the hospital. So we used to have to go to the Tupper building to do anatomy classes. So we had cadavers, and we used to have to go in and identify the nerves and the vessels, and really, it was a really great experience.
Not something I'd be that interested in doing, but anyway.
Yeah, and we did rotations to the hospital, the oral surgery, so we would get to see different things that the oral surgeons were doing. It was a a very robust education, because it was a university, of course, and we were integrated in the first year with the rest of the Dalhousie students, but then by the time you came to the second year, it was very insular, and you were kind of seeing clients. There was a huge clinic there where the public would come, and so students would be able to provide services for the public. So, and you had to be responsible for getting those patients and calling them and booking them. And,
Wow.
yeah.
I didn't realize you did that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think by the end of it, if I remember correctly, you had to see about 20 clients. But during that time as well, I also did an externship program where we went to St. Anthony and worked with Grenfell for 2
No
weeks.
way. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so we had to stay with the nurse in the nurses' residence, and
How long were you there?
2 weeks in February, which was right in the heart of winter.
I've been there in February, so
Yeah, and I love that too. So you got to, well, you had to meet certain requirements in order to qualify for that program. So, you know, and because it was, you know, Newfoundland, it was really special to be a part of
Were there
that.
some people from Dal with you, or?
Yeah, so I think about 10 students got to be involved, but it was various times. So like I went for
Okay.
my 2-week rotation. So no one was with me when I went. Each student would be chosen to go at a different time. And then it was also like Fort Hood, Labrador. I think Roddington was one of the locations, but for me it was St. Anthony. So when I left, another student with me, but we separated when we got to the location. And then, yeah.
So you did that, and you graduated, and where did you go from there?
I moved back to Newfoundland because Newfoundland was high demand at the time, looking for a hygienist, and my husband, of course, and I were together, and we moved back here. And I started working in a gum disease specialist clinic. I had been in general practice, of course, when I was an assistant. So when I was graduating, I knew that I wanted to be in a specialist clinic. So it's called periodontal disease clinic. So it looks after gum disease, anything supporting the gums and the bone and the tooth. So yeah, I spent 18 years in
Holy moly.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot there.
Yeah. And I did a lot of volunteer work. First, when I graduated, I was the chair of our public awareness committee. So we did a lot of community outreach and just talking about hygiene and what we do and educating the public about it. And then I became the president of our association, which then we became self-regulated while I was president. So I learned a lot about legislation and how to get government to change the act, and wrote a lot of policies. And
Interesting. Yeah. That's not something you would learn in a clinic.
No, not at all. There was a lot of outside education and mentorship from people in government that taught us how to do that stuff. And so now I think that brought me to a lot of other like regulatory stuff that I've done. I'm currently the chair of the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Professionals Council and our college. So yeah, I've done a lot of things with the career that are outside of the scope of just clinic.
It's nice though to give back to the community, isn't it? You know, it's one thing to go into a clinic, and I worked at the Telegram, but we did a lot of community stuff, and some of that's the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
You know?
It's what gives your career, interesting, robust, especially if you're curious.
So was there anyone like kind of mentoring you into that, or did you just kind of organically come upon that yourself?
It was organically, I think, because of my curiosity. It was just like, oh, I don't know about that. Let's find out about it. What does that mean? And then the more I'd ask questions, they were like, oh, you should help us. You should get involved. And I always did, just because of my curiosity. Yeah. My curiosity has taken me to a lot of places that I never would have expected to.
Well, let's talk a little bit. So you did 18 years in a periodontal clinic.
Yes, yes.
Is that when you took the leap onto your own, or did you work somewhere else in between?
No. So when I was, because I was involved in the association and our national association has conventions, and so that when you're in the role of the board with the association, you get invited to these things. So in 2013 we had a convention in Ontario, and I remember there was a trade show there at the time, and they had mobile equipment. And at that time was around when Haiti had their earthquake.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of health professionals going to Haiti. So this particular tradesman was talking about their equipment and how dentists were using it to go to Haiti. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then he said, but some hygienists are using it to go into long-term care. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. I don't think I've heard of that. And I knew that no one in Newfoundland had done that here. So then I became really curious and started doing a lot of research about, who's doing this, what does it look like? And there was a hygienist in Nova Scotia who was doing it. So I had gone there for a course, and I asked if I could shadow her. And I fell in love with it.
Where was this?
She was in Halifax.
So you were working still, but you were shadowing this person?
Yeah. So
how'd you manage to do that?
I went to Nova Scotia to do training to deliver local anesthetic. So that wasn't a part of the program when I went through Dal. So I went there to get extra training. So that took about 4 or 5 days. So while I was there, I asked if she would mind if I shadowed her, and so I just.
You are curious, aren't you?
Yeah. She had a huge setup, which was a little bit daunting, but.
And that was her own operation?
It was her own operation, yeah. She would go into seniors' homes and kind of do, but I remember specifically that she saw a client who had dementia, and I just fell in love with the whole process and being able to engage with the patient and being able to get the work done and how that process went. So I just became really curious about how that worked, because that's not something that you typically see in clinic. And then I just kept investigating, and then I bought the equipment. The CDBC actually helped me because I couldn't get a bank to say that was a great idea. But Margot Soucy was my representative, and she was amazing and fell in love with the idea too, and really supported me in that. And so, I purchased the equipment, which was a little compressor. And
was this, sorry for interrupting you, was this with the idea of going completely on your own, or doing it as a sideline?
This was a side hustle.
Okay,
yeah. Side hustle.
So you're working,
I was working,
but you're side hustling.
Right. So on the clinic that I worked in would close on Wednesdays. So in the middle of the week, and I was like, well, what else?
So you'd be off Thursday, Friday, or?
I would be off on Wednesdays.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
okay.
so I worked Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then on Wednesday I was trying to get some people interested, and when I started, people were like, "What are you doing that for? Nobody's going to do that. Why would you do that?"
Don't you love the naysayers?
Yeah, they're like, "Why do you do that?"
Do they make you work harder, or what?
It does, because then I'm like, I'm going to show you this is going to work. And in fairness, I guess, when I started, it was 2015. So that's 10 years ago. No one had ever done it here before. It was before COVID. And bringing services to people was a foreign idea, really, right? Especially dental services. Like, why would you even bother to do that? And people thought, oh, well, but old people have dentures. Like, why would you do that? But the Canadian government had done a survey, and the statistics showed that 80% of people between the ages of 60 and 79 had teeth. So that meant only 20% of the population had dentures at that age. And I was like, that's a huge number of people. And that was in 2009. So that just means that as time progressed, there would be more and more people with their own teeth, because now people have access to insurance and people understand the importance of preventative care. So that would mean, you know, that I started in 2015, that would mean in 5 to 10 years, people would actually, there would be a demand for the service. So I was like, this is going to work. I just need to do it right. So I did the side hustle.
So Wednesdays, did you do weekends as well, or just Wednesdays? Just Wednesdays.
Wednesdays.
One day a week you started. How long did you do that?
One patient a month.
No way.
Yeah.
But that was enough to inspire you.
It was enough to pay for the equipment. Well, actually, it wasn't even enough to pay for the equipment, really, but it caught on, you know, it started to catch on a little bit. I did a lot of beating the streets, you know, on Wednesdays to say, hey, do you know about this service? Let me talk to you about it.
When you say beat the streets, were you knocking on doors?
I was
like, what were you
knocking
doing?
on all the seniors' homes.
Yes,
you know,
yes,
like all these little private seniors' homes that were out there, and you know, I had to convince people that this was a good idea, because a lot of them were like, "No, everybody got dentures. Like, you don't really need to do that here." But then some people found out about it through, like, a friend told a friend that this was what my mother was getting done, and then that one told someone else. I went to try to get into Eastern Health at the time, because they have, of course, large facilities.
Yeah.
And the reaction that I got when I started was, we don't need you in here, we do our own things. And I was private. They were regional health authority, so they were like, you can't come in here. But then I had a lady who was having her mother's treatment done regularly and valued the importance of the care that I was giving. And her mom moved from a private facility into an Eastern Health facility. And she called and said, you know, I need you to see my mother here now. And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to come into a regional health facility. Yeah. And she was like, oh no, like this is happening. And she really was the advocate for her mother, and she paved the way for me to get in, because she demanded that the service be available, because it's not in long-term care. So that really opened up a huge amount of doors.
Wow.
And then because people would see me there, then they wanted to have that service done for their, you know, it's like, you know, you see someone come in and they're having this service done, and I want that for my mom.
I got to ask you though, just back up a little bit. So the lady's advocating for you. What's the time frame between when her mom went in? It was long-term care, was it? Between that first day she went in there and you being able to come in?
Months, maybe 3
a year.
4 months.
I was thinking a year, maybe. No, you're dealing with the bureaucracy of it all.
The long-term care had already started to talk about that, you know, we have to make a way for private providers to come in. You know, you're talking physiotherapists or massage therapists, right. You know, if you want to get services in. So they had already kind of had a draft policy about how to make that happen. And so this lady found out that that was happening, and then was like, this needs to happen now because I want this done. And
it's obvious you're tenacious, but she must have been pretty tenacious as well.
Yeah, no, she was.
Yeah.
I said she was like a little pit bull. Like, she's like, no, this is happening. And she's this little tiny woman.
Yeah.
But when it came to, and that's one thing that I've learned a lot in this process, is that you as the consumer, and that is a consumer of Eastern Health and healthcare, you as the consumer have the right to demand this stuff. And I think sometimes we don't understand the power that we have, you know?
Yeah.
And how to use the policies that those people have created, like that Eastern Health and government has created, to get the things that you want and you need.
Yeah.
And I think that the people that are there in our healthcare system genuinely want to do what's good for people. It's just sometimes how do we do it, or the manpower to get it done, or using the policies to be able to, So I think that's one thing that my volunteer work has done for me, is teach me how to use policy and how to use legislation to get things for people,
There's so much about you that's inspiring, volunteer work, but then this side hustle piece, which we're going to explore even more now. So you did that for how long? Every Wednesday for a year, 2 years?
I did it. Let's see. Well, COVID came. So I got into Eastern Health.
So you're at that, because you said 15, 16 you started doing it.
Yeah, I started in June 2015.
So you're 5 years doing every Wednesday.
Right. And then COVID hit. So at that point in time, I had paid off my equipment. So I was debt-free in my business. And Eastern Health, of course, shut down. You couldn't go in there. So I thought, that was a good run, right?
Yeah.
5 years, I don't know anything. I'll just close it up. And the patients started calling and saying, when are you coming back? And I was like, oh, well.
That's a good thing. Demand for your services is always good.
Yeah, and they were like, when are you coming back? And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come back. And they were like, no, I need this. Like, we really need this. And then I had a colleague who was a hygienist, and she had her own business. And she was like, if you shut this down, you're crazy, because the demand for bringing services is only going to get more now because of COVID. So I started to do home visits. I was doing home visits, but at a smaller rate. But because of the restrictions on dental clinics, like you could only go one person at a time, I had a few families call, and they would do like family visits, which kind of got me through the hump of COVID. And then Eastern Health, because of the demand again of the residents and their family, they allowed me to come in because they considered it an essential care.
Interesting.
So that also then, at that point in time, this was just a side hustle. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to learn how to be a business owner, because at that time I didn't. I was just a service provider,
right.
So then I used some government funding to hire a business coach, really. And she really helped me, understand business, understand how to pursue it, like how to set it up and expand, so that, ultimately here we are.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. So the person comes on as your coach. You're still employed elsewhere, are
Yes.
you? Tell me, it's interesting. I always find it interesting when you kind of glossed over the real transition.
Yeah.
That transition away from a paycheck. You've done it before. You went back to school and you gave up on your paycheck. How long did that transition take? You had your coach there. Was it a 6 month, 2 month, 5 months, 1 year? How long?
Before I went full
into here.
I didn't go full until 2 years ago. So I had the coach 2005. Yeah, so maybe 3 years, I guess. I was still doing the side hustle.
Right.
And then in 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to do it full time and expand into a building. So that took a little bit of guts.
Well, a bigger investment. You've got quite. I'll probably cut to some of that, but you have quite a facility here. So the side hustle. Now you've got to A, walk away from a paycheck. B, invest in more equipment.
Yeah.
This is a serious move you're making.
Serious move. Yeah.
And your decision on that has taken how long to get the courage to do it? How long?
Well, I guess when I, let's say 3 years past COVID, I had a different coach, and she came on with me to kind of help me expand and think about it in a bigger way than just a service for long-term care. The dental clinic that I worked with was very generous and allowed me to use some of their sterilization equipment. So I was getting so busy that I couldn't sustain that. Like sometimes I'd be there till 10 o'clock at night cleaning my equipment.
On a Wednesday night, you're still
Yeah.
during your side hustle.
Yeah. So I would work all day on Wednesday, then I'd go in at night and clean all my instruments and then have it all prepared so that the next, and then I was doing Wednesday and a Friday, I think, because I ended up putting on an extra day. But I knew that, like, okay, this is expanding too much. I can't sustain it anymore. I'm going to have to figure out. So I thought about, okay, I need to have my own sterilization place. Like, I need to establish this. And the person that I was working with at the time said, well, if you're going to have a sterilization room, you might as well put a chair in there and then it'll offset your costs, because sterilization is an expense. But if you had a chair, you can produce, money to kind of offset the cost. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that, because there had been lots of hygienists that opened up clinics. And I thought, there's enough services available in the city to be able to, I don't think that I want to do that. It would have to be something different. And
so you're mobile. This is a mobile clinic still, correct?
Yes.
And then you're talking about having a chair, which was static.
Right.
So you're running two opposing opposite. Yeah, right. I get.
So I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I see why I see your reticence, and okay, yeah.
And so we just kind of played with the idea of like, what would it take for you to think that it would be a good idea? And I said, well, it would have to service people that don't already have service. And so she said, okay, well, what would that look like? And so from the stories that I had heard from people in my mobile service, so, it moved from not just people in long-term care and seniors. I started people from the disability community started to hear about the service, and they would call. So, someone in a wheelchair and they can't get out of their house, or they don't have transportation, and then they would call. And so I would hear their conversations, and then they would express to me, this is so great. This is the experience I've had in the past. This changes the experience for me. So they've talked about, I went in, but I couldn't get out of my chair to get in the dental chair. And so I couldn't really get the service, or, the wheelchair accessible bus couldn't take me, and I couldn't get to the appointments on time. So, then there was a particular lady who was in her 30s, and she lived independently, but her father would take her to her appointments and transfer her from her chair to the dental chair. But then her dad died. And she said, I can't go anymore. Yeah. And I was like, this is ridiculous. How come we don't have wheelchair lifts in dental clinics? And that's really what prompted me to do this facility, was to create an accessible space so that people who had special needs or just needed to have accessibility, whether that be walking, or if you're blind, or if you're deaf, or if you have autism, or, there's a realm of things that people need a different approach to care about. And so that's what set me off on, if I'm going to have a building, it would have to be this type. Mm-hmm. And then that created this big project.
Yeah, well, I can see it's a project. So you're mobile. Just give me an idea of your mobility and your, do you call it static or office? Yeah. So what's the split between time, or do you have people doing both all the time?
Right now it's just me. And we are in pursuit of finding other providers because we're so busy.
Opportunity there for anyone watching.
That's right. So right now we do 2 days a week mobile, but we need to do more. And we do 3 days in clinic. And the clinic is, like I said, is designed for accessibility, but it's for everyone. So I try to tell people that when you, let's call us able-bodied people, when able-bodied people support a place like this, it makes it continue for people that need it the most. So a lot of times people say, oh, you have that accessible clinic, it's just for people with disabilities. No, it's not, because it's for people who want to support having this type of accessibility in their city, in their town, right? And when everybody contributes to that, then everyone, it's universal design, you know. If someone in a wheelchair can come in here and have access, then anybody can have access, you know. So yeah.
It's interesting. I can't help but think about the sideline piece. I mean, I had a sideline from 1988 to 2020.
Yeah.
And nurtured that, and I think more people, I mean, what do you think? I think more people should have a sideline, because I don't know whether this resonates for you or not. You know, despite the fact I worked for someone else, when I had my sideline activity, the money that I made at that, I felt so fulfilled by that. Not to diminish what I was doing for the other people, but I don't know, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it was, you know? It's like I think I call it a labor of love, really, right? It's this thing that you nurture and you grow yourself, and it feels like you're giving to something instead of just working for something, you know? I love what it's extremely hard work. It definitely was easier when I just worked in the clinic, but I don't feel the same reward from, it's just different. And being able to see a need and then use your business to fill that need feels really, really great. Yeah, to be able to pursue something.
It's funny, I think you and I talked about this before we hit record, but I am overjoyed by being able to be on my own. But there are times when there's sleepless nights, you worry about the accounting piece and all of these things that are constantly nagging at you.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think the sideline for you has morphed into a fulfilling career, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Now, I'm not going to lie. It's extreme. Like the first year that I opened this building, I wanted to throw up every day. Like that, it was a lot of stress. One thing I learned about being an entrepreneur is you get really comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it also, like, seeing it grow and seeing it evolve and seeing the demand for it also gives you the drive to continue doing it. And I mean, we're only 2 years in yet.
Yeah.
So like, there's not, like, people glamorize owning your own business. It's extremely stressful, and if you wonder and you doubt yourself a lot if you did the right thing.
Well, on that note, look, I agree with you. As demand comes in, it makes you really realize that the product you're offering is worth it, and it's in demand. But I think people don't realize how business can be isolating. As you, ultimately, it all rests on your shoulders, and I find that a little bit much sometimes. Like, the time, I worked for 30 years for other people. They did all basic, they did all the worry. Yeah. So, I mean, we're not trying to paint a negative picture here, but I think it's really important. We're called Gale Force Wins for a reason. This is not a panacea where you open a business and the business flows in and you go to sleep every night and everything is honky-dory, right?
No. So, you do have to, find people that are supportive for you. Like, I'm a part of NLO, and we do a mastermind class there, which has been helpful. Seeking out coaches to help you, or just groups that. So, I mean, and there's a lot of women-led businesses here that help people, other women. And just putting up boundaries for yourself is another big one that I'm trying to learn how to do. Like, how do you balance a healthy lifestyle and be a business owner, looking after yourself and your family? Because I have a family. I have 2 teenage sons, and
How old are they?
They're 18 and 16. I have a husband who's had some mental health issues, so like it has not been glamorous. No. And so being able to balance business and life and, is a continual learning experience, really.
One of the things, I have a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, and I'm incredibly proud of being able to tell the 2 of them that Dad doesn't rely on anyone else. Tell me a little bit about, your boys, and they, their mom is doing this heroic thing every day. Maybe they're still too young to realize it. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because my son is graduating high school this year. And he's applied to MUN Business. So
Has he?
Like
Good for him.
This entrepreneur course at school, and it's like talking about. So I'm assuming that some of the things that they've seen me do is kind of piqued their interest, maybe. So. It's the whole family becomes involved when you become an entrepreneur. We've made a lot of sacrifices, and I think that it's been a good experience though, because understanding that money is not always it's fluid, right? Sometimes you have a lot, sometimes you have a little, and the things that we truly need are family and the experiences that you have together, and not necessarily the things that you have. And I think that some of this experience that we've had together is about learning those things and what's the most important. Not just about, what does success look like? Success is not necessarily lots of money. It can also be, how the blessings that you get from your family. And so that's where we're at right now. Well, I would hope that the globs of money are coming eventually.
Catherine, that's a beautiful description of business. I think about 5 years ago, and I told, more like 3.5 years ago, when I told my children, I gathered them together, it was November, and I said, Dad's going to make this sideline his full-time job. My little fella, who would have been, he's 17 now, he would have been 14, he goes, Dad, are we going to be able to afford gifts for Christmas? And I looked at him and I said, son, I'll be very honest. I have no idea. Yeah. And I'll be quite honest, there's times since we started this business, I've had less money than I've had in the last 30 years. Yeah. But I know that we're building something, and I'll never forget it, Gina Pecor, who you may know, who's built quite a business, her and her husband built Genoa Design International. They were at a stage in their lives where 2 businesses they had were faltering. And I asked Gina, Gina, what kept you going? She said, Gerry, hope. Hope kept me going. And I think the anticipation that demand is there for your business is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what keeps me going, really. Yeah, because, day to day it feels uncomfortable, but knowing that this is going to work, I know it's going to work. And when you get people like your neighbor who comes in and says, this is amazing, and this experience that we had is amazing, knowing that they're going to go and tell someone else, and someone else is going to have that experience, makes you hang on and just hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you a question, the last question. It'll be around advice. Despite the fact this journey is still unfolding, and we've talked a lot about we're not sure where it's going, it's uncomfortable. What advice would you give to, let's say, a young woman who's thinking about entrepreneurship or thinking about being intrapreneurial? There's a guy, actually DC, Don Cody, said to me, we should talk about being intrapreneurial within jobs. Is there any advice you could give to someone about that? Putting you on the spot now.
Yeah. I just think that you should pursue curiosity. I really do. I think that and ask a lot of questions. You know, I remember that kid when and someone told me that I asked too many questions, and then I realized, wait, asking a lot of questions is really good. It's how you learn. And as an entrepreneur, you need a lot of help. No one does anything on their own. So you need to find the people who are willing to teach you how to do things, and be not afraid to take risk, because risk and failing is how you learn. And, you know, take small risk, and that way you learn, you know, at a lesser scary rate. But yeah, if you're young and you want to become an entrepreneur, there's lots of support for entrepreneurs out there, which I didn't realize until I got the coaching to, you know, the government wants us to give back to the community and our province. And when we build businesses, that means the province becomes successful as well. And so, yeah, just do it at a small rate, get a side hustle, and makes it less scary, I guess, you know? But yeah, maybe just find people who are willing to invest in you and speak with you and talk with you and teach you, you know?
Well, that's amazing advice. I said it was the last question. I have one last question that's probably going to be a little easier. How do people get a hold of you? First of all, the name of your business, maybe your website, phone number. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we're the Oral Health Center or Mobile Smiles. They're the same company, but we have two different names. Our phone number is on our website, which is theoralhealthcenter.com. Our number is 709-691-7261.
That's pretty good. You remember your own phone number.
My own.
I don't know my own sometimes.
You can email us, call us. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram. Or you just come to 1641 Topsail Road, right next to Starbucks. And the Pure and Simple, we have a great little community here of businesses. And so we're easy to find here in Paradise, and we're fully accessible. There's wheelchair parking right outside the door. Yeah, I'm really proud of what we have here. And I hope to inspire other businesses to also be accessible. So, yeah.
Well, I'm inspired by talking to you. This is someone who had a sideline business operating once a week, and she's parlayed it into a business that is something she's really proud of. And you know what? She deserves to be proud of it. This is an example of someone who's shown courage and leadership. We need more people to get uncomfortable, get out there, do things, create a sideline business. You know, you're not going to make $10,000 a month in your first try. You may not make that for many years, but you know what? I love your story, and the reason Gale Force Wins exists is for stories like this. We need more positivity, and I thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, love it.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.